and welcome back to Sam's on Wrestling. I am Baby Sam, and this is a man that is so old that he's actually from the Cretaceous period himself. That's why he likes dinosaurs. Sam.
Do you know what? You could have gone with the Jurassic, the Triassic,
Yeah.
the Pliocene. You could have gone older than Cretaceous.
Well,
it's just
yeah.
because you didn't know any of the name outside
I
Cretaceous.
do
and
know Jurassic and Triassic.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't even plan that one. That just came off the top of my head, so I just went
I
Cretaceous.
don't like when you host because there's always an old joke getting thrown in my way.
Yeah.
And I've been really kind of not done any jokes such as you're so young that you don't even know who S Club 7 are. You're so
Like
young
S Club 7.
that if you went into a park and flashed someone, they would be arrested.
Yeah.
I haven't done any of these
No,
jokes.
you haven't. No, appreciate
I've been a
it.
really
No,
kind
yeah.
and lovely person.
I've been a
Hi,
stat
welcome to the
escalator
round
man.
table.
Welcome to the round table. This is where we have just an open topic discussion on things. It's a bit less format, it's a bit more free. And obviously don't forget to like, share and subscribe if you would like to see more round table discussions on wrestling. But let's get into it.
So, what are we going to be talking about today, Sam? What are we bringing to the forum?
We are talking about what makes a great storyline.
Yeah, I tell you what, the reason I wanted to talk about this kind of ilk today is because there's been a lot of tribalism in wrestling. And one of the things that gets kind of thrown at each other from WWE to AEW is stories and storylines and stuff like that. And, you know, a lot of the AEW tryhards, like real, are like, this is about wrestling, as if WWE has no wrestling. But then you sit down and watch AEW have amazing storylines, which are the number one thing in the company. Hangman Page's whole thing, winning the title, is an incredible storyline. MJF and CM Punk was an incredible storyline. Swerve and Hangman, the entirety of 2024, was an incredible storyline. Brian, so it's like, no, you do have storylines. It's not just about wrestling, and those were the number one things in the company. So it's a very odd thing to argue against. And in the same way, WWE have fallen into the trap of what's the point in these guys feuding, or why are we having a match here? They're just placed together, and sometimes feud for months.
Yes.
I go back years here. I think it's 2001. Jericho and Kane had a feud for about 6 months. Do you know how this feud started?
I do. Jericho spilled coffee and Kane.
And you're like, didn't this end in like last man standing and chains?
That's what you just do in GM mode. Just throw them together and just keep putting them in matches and stuff. Yeah.
So the reason I want to talk about this is because of this like talk about storylines and, you know, this isn't real. Blah, 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 blah. So what makes a good storyline? What connects you to a storyline? You've actually got a few notes. I have no notes. I'm free.
I did, yeah. Well, I had a few notes that just to remind me of what makes a good storyline.
Should we try and like almost do it like linearly, like the start?
Yes.
Because I think that's actually the difficult bit. Like, why have these two or these four, these three, whatever, been paired together? If you think about some of the greatest feuds of all time, a lot of them don't start in the most incredible way necessarily.
No.
So, what do you think? Like, what's the start? How do you start a great feud?
I think there's lots of different ways, but I think you've got to have characters who have objectives. So it can be like, I need to...
The actors kicked in
here. Like, maybe I want to win the Royal Rumble and you eliminate me. That's a very easy trope to do. Or you want a title shot and this other person wants a title shot. And there's something going on. Or maybe they want, a male character interested in this female character. And then, you know, this male character comes and swoops in. Anything like that. That one character is stopping another character from getting what they want, and from there you can go, well, this is kind of business at first, and it escalates, which is something we'll talk about later. It's something personal.
You've said a kind of terminology that I think is right. It's the idea that one is blocking the other in some way, shape, or form. I think is exactly what it is, because that is the reason two people would want to fight each other or get in the ring, or, you know, disagree or whatever. It's because there has been an obstacle placed in the way of one of them, and that is the obstacle. Could be in place of both of them, technically.
Ideally, it's both.
Yeah, so, and that's the interesting thing, to me, it's not just about that, it's about the connection between the two as well. So, like, one of the best rivalries I can think of that is, like, has an organic start is Batista. He is a part of Evolution the entire time, and that's not the start of the storyline, but because there's a built narrative, a built backstory there, that created that incredible moment. Batista wasn't the best wrestler in 2005. He was good, but because of the build that had happened with Evolution of him, the character, and the slow... So you could argue, when did this start? Did it start at the thumbs down? I don't think so.
No.
I think this starts about 5 months prior. There was definitely issues at Survivor Series they were having in
the
before.
chamber.
And you go, there's your start. And it's the slowness and the slow descent between two characters having different objectives. Triple H starting to hold Batista down, being in charge. And that's the beauty, the nuances. So you're absolutely right. That start needs to have two things. It needs to have an obstacle in place, but it also needs to have, I think, that connection between the two, because they don't need to have a long backstory like Triple H and Batista had. But I think that connection for one reason or another, and you've already said it, like one eliminates one from the Royal Rumble, and that's how it starts. Because I think Kurt Angle and Shawn Michaels, one of the best matches of WrestleMania 21, starts in the most, it's so pathetic. Oh, Shawn just lives like Kurt gets and he attacks, and you're like, really? Okay, you're going to start WrestleMania feud. And then they built from that point on. So you don't have to have the best start, provided you build the connection between the two of them, which they then did. But I tell you what, for me to be connected to it, to have those two characters have something between them, I think is really important. And something real. Now, obviously, we're going to put spooky characters to the side, for example, because that's something going to be slightly different. But they still have feuds and storylines that are amazing, but starts in a different way. But for me, I want real. Even in the world of wrestling, I want it to be real. And what I mean by that is, yes, you really should be wanting to beat that person up or get into an argument, get into a feud or whatever.
And what I really love is when they start a feud and go, right, these two wrestlers, do they have any prior history from a few years ago? And then they've got, this thing where Randy Orton actually cost... it was CM Punk and Randy Orton 2011.
Yeah.
And they were randomly putting the two together for a Mania match, which is fine.
Yeah.
And then it's probably Punk's idea. Went with the whole thing of in 2008 when Punk was world champion, Randy punt kicked.
Yes.
Punk cost him the title and he didn't get to defend it. And he cited that as the reason. You know what I mean? And so he was feuding with Randy. Stuff like that. Brilliant. Like, you've just given me a completely organic and understandable reason, even if it's for the villain, the heel. You still understand why they're doing it. They're not just being evil to be evil.
You just said a thing that always bugs me about a lot of modern day TV shows and films. Let's look at Marvel, for example. One of Marvel's biggest things, why they went so successful before kind of this downturn period, is they actually made all their heroes spectacular and they kind of gave their villains nothing. Which actually people go, those rubbish, these villains rubbish. I'm like, no, this made sense. Because if you watch all of DC, their villains are more interesting. The Joker is way more interesting than Batman, no matter who you are. Superman's villains, every single one of them is more interesting than Superman. Same for Wonder Woman, I would say they're generally more interesting, particularly in the comics anyway. And Marvel do have that problem in the comics, but what they went is, we're not going to pick the most amazing villains, against them. And Loki, you're interesting, we're going to put you up. And that was the thing. So they made these kind of heroes much more spectacular, and the villains were meh. But it did mean that the stories weren't amazing. But when the stories were amazing, such as Loki or Thanos, the villains had a reason. They had an objective. They had a belief. And if you're an actor out there, or if you're someone who enjoys films, if you're ever wondering, why is this film better? And you're not really realised it's because the villain has a reason that is correct. Like when Thanos saying, "I want to bring balance because it's unsustainable." You're sat there going, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, damn. Yeah. But you're doing it in a horrible way. You're trying to get rid of half the life on planet Earth and all the other planets. But you are doing it because you know you're right. And that makes you go, damn. So Punk now being the heel and Randy being the babyface and going, you cost me the world title 3 years ago. You do go, yeah, you did do that. Yeah, you did do that. That's true.
But then the brilliance... What makes a villain great is when they are right, and as you said, they are going about it in the wrong way.
That's what makes them a villain.
Yes, it grounds them in plausibility, and it gives the story a bit of nuance.
And they don't know they're the villain.
Yes.
A villain doesn't think they're the villain. If you're an actor as well, if you want to play a villain, don't play a villain. Believe you're right. You're just doing wrong actions. And I think the best heels in WWE who are main eventers, because I think it's a bit different in the mid-card, are the ones who believe themselves. You think about Kevin Owens in back end of 2024, he believed he was right, and that's what worked so well. And you think about some of the great other heels, you think Savage, with the he believed Hogan was doing all these things with Elizabeth. He wasn't then proven wrong, went, I was wrong, sorry about that. No, he believed it. But he made a villain because he just went about it in the most aggressive and heinous and incorrect way and then ends up with other things and then it spirals out. And that's a really important thing. And I think that does get, we're talking about heels now, how to make a great heel, but it's really important when it comes to starting that storyline.
Absolutely.
So we've got that start and we've got that reason. What would you then move on to that? What's important at this point? You've got to get that start, and this is why I think I'm going to call it the Bray Wyatt syndrome. When Bray Wyatt was at his kind of rambling worst in round of 2013, 14, 15 sort of thing, before he got to become the Fiend to be brilliant. There was a lot of, he'd start a rivalry with someone and you go, this is fantastic. Like, I think Dean Ambrose with the Ghost, bit weird, but he's like, oh great, and he does a really great promo on Raw about why he's feuding with Dean Ambrose, and you know he thinks, oh, this is brilliant, and they go, we've got 4 more weeks to the pay-per-view, and they just pad it and fill it, and it just kind of dwindles down because it turns out Bray Wyatt has done a go home Raw promo with 3 or 4 weeks to go. So I saw that happen with a lot. Bray would start this amazing rivalry and then it would just fizzle before we even got to the pay-per-view match.
The classic example is Mark Henry on John Cena.
Oh my God, yes.
Incredible angle. Can you name me anything that happened in the next 3 weeks?
I actually don't. No.
Nothing.
Nothing. Oh my God, you're actually right.
You cannot name anything that happened after that. Before the pay-per-view, and it kind of dwindled out and Cena won, lol. That's it.
Yeah, it tapped him out, didn't it?
So it's what I mentioned earlier.
Oh my God, you're right. I know nothing.
Nothing. But that's a legendary segment. We've no idea what happened next week.
Oh my God,
it's that forgettable. And this is what I was saying before, escalation. Punk and Drew were a masterclass of this.
Yes, they were. And they had difficulty because one couldn't work for so long. Their difficulty actually became when Punk could work.
Well,
because then they were like, right, now we've actually got to do the 3-act structure, but we've already done the 3-act structure for storyline prior, and they kind of had a bit of a struggle. This is why the wristband became a little bit too prominent, but thankfully they're still so brilliant that they were able to make it work and keep it going.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that they had so much restrictions made them be so creative in that. So I think they ultimately, because they're 2 great minds, just used it to their advantage. But it is that like escalation, because Punk and Drew did start off like Drew had the heat because he'd injured Punk.
So there's your start.
Yeah, exactly. A brilliant organic start, ruined his WrestleMania. But then it's the fact that Drew kept on pushing it and really rubbing something to the bones.
Because the funny thing is, Punk was costing Drew. Punk was doing the heel things. That's why it was confusing. But Punk had a reason. You've been an arsehole to me recently, and therefore because you then started being an arsehole to me, I'm now going to be an arsehole to you. And then Drew's like, you cost me title shot, and it's like, yeah, but you started it, but then you started it, and then you started, and that works really well. That was a wonderful feud. That was such a wonderful rivalry for that.
For me, I would be feud of the year.
Yeah.
But that's it. It's escalation. Especially if you're doing long term stuff, like Undertaker and Shawn Michaels.
Yes.
When Shawn retired and had that last match, he started off by wanting that rematch with the Undertaker and asking for it properly.
Undertaker's not even involved.
No, exactly.
Undertaker's nothing to do with it.
No, Undertaker eventually comes and says no. Shawn goes, right, I'm going to win the Rumble, and gets more and more desperate. Then he loses, starts super kicking referees, going off the rails, and then ends up doing a very heel thing, which is interfering in the chamber.
Fantastically creative, by the way.
Brilliant.
Really helps a feud if you can do something really creative.
Yeah, and super kicks the Undertaker, a heel move, but he had his reasons, and you see the escalation of how he ends up costing DX the tag title.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Stuff like that. Escalation, it's basic storytelling, but it works, and we don't always see it in wrestling.
No.
And it's brilliant.
So what else would you say? So we're starting that middle ground, and you've got to make sure that you've got reasons you're still feuding. This was a problem that WWE fell into. I'm going to say fell into. I'm going to say still not fully out of. I would say this is one thing that AEW do slightly better than WWE, only slightly, admittedly. But when 2 people are feuding in WWE, they have to be in the same segment as each other every single week. And I was like, I go back to the Ruthless Aggression here, and the amount of times that it'd be like Hogan's in a feud, he's the title shot, but he's having a match with William Regal that night. And you're like, and they would do like a mini TV feud or something, even though he's in a grand feud with, I think it was The Undertaker. And you're there going, yeah, it makes sense. You don't have to be in the same segment. You can do a segment later. And it turns out like every time Liv Morgan was on telly in 2024, Rhea Ripley had to be on telly with her, and you couldn't get away from each other, and you end up there going, okay, this is the Rhea and Liv spot, and it gets a bit like, whereas you need to have a reason each week. So you're talking about that escalation, but there's also, don't just go, and you 2 do your thing here, have a little bit of promo, because you end up having, some people just end up having the same promo exchange 2 or 3 times. And I used to read a guy called John Canton, who's a really good reviewer of wrestling, really honest, really unbiased. And the amount of times he would say, decent promo, can miss it, didn't really say much or didn't really add anything to the match. Because you go back to Drew and Punk, they had their promo exchange in Hell in a Cell. They've been talking for 8 months, and yet they still delivered a killer promo that built the match.
Yeah, well, you did have scarcity with them because, again, sometimes Punk wasn't on Raw a lot of the time, and they would have separation. So then Drew would have this whole feud with, say, Damian Priest or someone, and go to Clash of the Castle, and Punk wouldn't be about, and then suddenly he turns up at the pay-per-view. So you're right, it's like when you've got the overexposure, it's too much. Like the Judgment Day with like Zayn and Owens last year.
It got extreme.
It was, it was ridiculous.
Yeah.
So you can really overexpose it, and I think you want it to be special every time it happens. So, and sometimes you just have to go, right, it's it's overstaying its welcome and pull the plug in some cases, because I think there's plenty of examples where it draws on way too long.
Yeah. I think there are sometimes they've actually pulled the plug too early.
That's also true.
But the thing is, I always think sometimes this is the thing that wrestling fans don't like, and TV fans as well. It's not just wrestling fans. Remember, wrestling is a TV show, and I think some people forget that wrestling is a TV show. Is that they pull the plug, and they're going, "Oh, could you just give us a resolution, even if it's for 1 week? Just wrap it up, finish it up." And that would be really nice. But they don't do that a lot of the time. Or, as you say, the worst thing is just keeps going. You don't have to have 3 pay-per-view matches.
No, you really don't.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
And I always go, when people go, oh, Cesaro should have been an opportunity. And I went, Cesaro had a title shot. He went Roman Reigns, had a pay-per-view. That was enough for someone who's not on the upper echelon. He got the pay-per-view. And I think they should do that more. Give someone a random title shot via earning. They don't have to win, but it puts them on a slight pedestal. They get to be in a main event slot, and you show the world a little bit more. And I think that's the problem you then run into Vince booking. Is Vince would book these stars and build you going, you're ready for a big moment, and then never gave them a big moment. I think about Braun Strowman having those incredible moments in 2018, 2019, and then it was like, and we're getting to something that's really important. No feud for you. No storyline for you.
Like when you have a big singles match at WrestleMania.
Never. It just didn't, outside of, I've got to turn around. Yeah. So what would you go to next? So we've had our, start. We're now the escalation.
Yeah, well, I really think it's helpful to bring other characters into the story. So not just have a one-on-one. Like even with Punk and Drew, you had Seth there. You need,
Seth added to it.
You need even Adam Pearce. You can argue.
Yeah.
You need other on-screen characters to make it more dynamic. If it's just you two cutting promos on each other every week, there's only so much you can do.
Where's the layers?
Yeah, and I really like it when they integrate different stories with each other briefly. I think it creates the world. It's much more dynamic. And obviously the Bloodline is the biggest example of a storyline in the past probably 10 years.
Yeah, well, it just kept going, didn't it?
It has kept going. But that was brilliant at just bringing other characters into it, like Zayn, and even, when they brought the Usos back. Solo, yeah, exactly.
Solo wasn't in it, yeah.
And I love it when you have a dynamic. This is where stables can be brilliant. And
yes.
In some cases bad, but in some cases brilliant.
Watch our yay and nay on factions. There you go. Pros and cons on factions.
That's good plugging.
Plugging.
Yes. But you can have a dynamic within a group that's technically an alliance, but there's different frictions within the group. I think of Orton and the Wyatts, that whole infiltrating them thing. When you have multiple characters, it makes your storyline possibility so much more dynamic.
That's why we did the yay and nay on factions. The whole point of having a faction is you're meant to build either the main star up more, but it should also be building up other stars, and eventually they should be able to feud within themselves. And I think some people have missed the mark with that because, the main star doesn't want to lose. Randy Orton with legacy, or he wasn't told he could lose. And the whole point of that is that's that storyline of character development that can form into a story. Then we talk about with Batista, the idea that you can build somebody up so much so that they're going, I want you two now to feud. This would really, really work. Or vice versa, you can create a storyline that can become something grander, such as Bryan and Kane feuded at SummerSlam and then ended up having to become a tag team and watching their dynamic build, and you've got something different. So we've gone from, that's a storyline. The other people weren't matters. They weren't feuding with anyone. They were feuding with themselves while being friends and building up to the end where they became a really good team. That worked really, really, really well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at Sheamus and Cesaro with the bar as well, is another really good example of that. Something I also want to get onto, especially with feuds. One, I think I don't think it has to happen all the time, but the best feuds, everyone comes out looking better.
Yes, that's the whole
Everyone.
point. That should be the point of wrestling, unless
Yeah.
you've purposely built it in that sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's whether you mentioned.
I'll go on top of that. This is why I get really annoyed at people with promos. They go, "Oh, you killed them in the promo. You're not meant to." Okay, let's get this clear. Don't get me wrong. You can insult the person or whatever, and that could be your gimmick. But you still need to put over the match, and you still need to put over their credibility. If you want to know who is the best at this, and you don't realise why everyone cares for a Brock Lesnar match or a Roman Reigns match, Paul Heyman. And you watch, I love studying Paul Heyman talk about promos, because he literally goes, why would that sell the match, me completely destroying you? Because we know Heyman could destroy anyone if he wanted to, but why does it sell the match? Why does it sell the feud? And you go, he will put the people over at the same time. There's that always him in the background being that fearful going, you know, I remember Brock versus Test at King of the Ring, right? Brock's going to win the King of the Ring. We all know Brock's going to win the King of the Ring. He's not going to lose to Test. Let's be honest. But you got Heyman on the outside. Avoid the boot! Avoid! He's got the big boot! And then Tess hit the big boot. He's like, no! No! And that literally, no feud. It's King of the Ring, and yet I feel jeopardy. And suddenly I feel that they could have had a storyline if they wanted to do it. A leaf has fallen off a plant. Oh no! Oh, it was Test. Yeah, Test! You could have feuded with Lesnar. We miss you, Test.
Could have beat the streak.
We could. Yeah, right. Yeah. He had a good match with The Undertaker at SummerSlam 2002. It was a decent match. And so, yeah, you see what I mean? You can even do, like, in a small thing that doesn't even have a feud, you can build something within it. So you can have storylines within the match. It's why we have it as a section on our power rankings. You know, storytelling. Can you tell a story in the ring? Because sometimes you don't need to have a feud. You don't need to. Storytelling can happen within a ring, and then that can create a storyline within itself.
Yeah.
Shall we talk about storylines that produce a double turn? The ill-fated double turn, one of the most difficult things to do in wrestling. I think it's been done well twice. And even then, one of them is actually a bit of a cheat. So Austin and Brett, obviously everyone goes, Austin and Brett's like, watch the rules beforehand. Austin's getting very facey, Brett's getting very heely. It pretty much has already happened. But I would say it was an official thing.
Yeah.
But look how that built. Austin is the heel. He is so heel going into that feud. He eliminates him from the Royal Rumble after Austin has already been eliminated.
Pretty fairly,
And then they cost each other the WWE Championship, you know, after Shawn loses his smile and all that jazz. And they then had an incredible match, and within that match built a different storyline on top of a different storyline. You changed a character because of the story. Austin couldn't just turn babyface by not giving up on a random episode of Superstars or Raw.
Yeah.
Like, building this character up as, you know, throughout this storyline, to be able to then not give up and then people getting outside. But it wouldn't have, if Austin had just done that, it would have been a good babyface turn. But the fact that Brett was being an arse in the match and being villainous at the same time made Austin even more babyface. And that storyline created. So literally that double turn, one of the greatest double turns of all time, gave sympathy to Austin and heat to Brett. And also, you want to say about giving shine to the gave shine to Ken Shamrock as well. The forgotten entity in that. Ken Shamrock's the referee, and he then got a little bit of shine, a bit of heat as well. And that is superb storytelling. You can say whatever you want about Brett, and I have. I am not a fan of Brett. I think he's a 3 promo, and I really believe that. But his storytelling is, particularly in the ring at the very least, is just exquisite. And then when you put a feud on top of that storytelling, I think about him with Piper, WrestleMania 8. I think about him with Flair. These are just wonderful stories that get told.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't argue with that.
By the way, the other double turn is Dolph Ziggler and Del Rio. I actually thought was very well done. Attacking the head over and over and over again. Too bad it went nowhere.
Yeah, that's a shame. And I think on that as well, you want 2 characters who can almost attack each other's weaknesses, if that makes sense. Like, you've got a hero villain that exposes the other one's flaws in a way as well.
Well, there's the jeopardy.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's
and
the
you want
next
that
thing.
relationship. Yeah, and I was going to say, it's great also, and it's not always possible in wrestling because sometimes you do have to be predictable. And smart wrestling fans can see where you're going, which
predictability is a good thing. It means you're telling the correct story. It's about the idea of predictability not being boring. Remember that. Predictability is fine because it means you've told the right story, and you shouldn't just then deviate because everyone's guessed this. You know, Vince did that a few times.
Sheamus.
Like, Sheamus is an example. But, you know, sometimes go with the predictability because it's the right story you're telling. Just make the story interesting inside the predictability. Cena should have won the 2013 Royal Rumble, but it was so predictable that it was boring.
Yeah.
There was nothing around it to make it feel like it wasn't going to be predictable. There's no story going into it outside of, we need to do Cena versus Rock at 29.
Exactly.
And there's an example of it being boring.
Yeah.
Whereas if Punk had come out, if they'd done the Rock and Punk first, Rock win the title, and then Punk come out and cost Cena the match, and you could have had the world title be the Royal Rumble, which is what I would have done, suddenly then it's not predictable. Or you could have had Punk come out to try and cost Cena the match, and then Cena still win. Because how often does someone come out try to cost you the match, and then you still succeed anyway?
Yeah.
That would all these things would have made it more interesting. But no, Cena wins.
I do just want to highlight the fact you would have had Jack Swagger win the 2013 Royal Rumble.
No,
I want that on record.
I wouldn't have had that going in anyway.
I know.
I actually told you who I think should have been going for the world title at the time. It's Ryback.
Yeah,
it's actually who I would have had going for the title. But same as Braun Strowman.
Yeah.
I built you up. No match for you.
Pretty much. But I will say, like, you're completely correct. But when you do have those magic moments where you've got a story and there's plausibility that either one will win, those are the best. And even if you are going this certain direction, if you can throw red herrings in, like, I think we all knew Zayn was going to join up with the Bloodline eventually. But you threw the red herring in of, he might join solo, and he had complete reason
to be
join
fair,
solo.
though, we thought it was them going to attack Zayn.
Yeah.
And in the end, it was not. It was Zayn actually attacked them. That's the red herring with it. That's why everyone loved it, because it was Zayn's defiance. That's so much different than what we thought it would be. Think about the difference between, again, going back to a storyline here, but I'm going to compare it to another one. Randy Orton gets turned on by Triple H, doesn't work, dies a death, because we have to now support a person who was still a heel but got turned on, and we're like, we didn't care.
Yeah.
Batista turns on Triple H in defiance. There's your difference. The same storyline, but two people have been heels the entire time. It now has to do a babyface turn and build a story. Died a death was one of the greatest stories told in the last 20 years. It really
you make
is.
a really good point. That's not even on my notes, that, but you need to give each character autonomy
Yes.
of their decisions.
Oh,
especially,
yes, very good.
Especially a babyface.
How often does someone do something and you go, why are you doing that?
Yeah.
Why are you doing that? Paul Heyman siding with the Big Show over Brock Lesnar. Man who hasn't lost a match or anything like that. Again, they just needed a couple extra lines of, I now can't control Brock, because Brock was defying Paul. If Paul had come out and gone, I now couldn't control Brock, I can control this giant. That's all I needed, but they didn't do that.
Absolutely. But that's what it is. You need to, especially a babyface. Yeah. Seth's the classic example where they wasted, we were just talking about it off screen, where we were so excited for Seth to come back. Everyone was, he got that.
This is when he got, after he's done his leg in, missed out on the WrestleMania, came out and attacked Roman Reigns.
Yeah, it should be specific. But yeah.
He's been babyface and heel a lot.
Yeah, exactly. But he came back, and they had the whole Kevin Owens winning thing, which was great. But in terms of Seth, he was a heel, completely going along with Triple H interfering, like he was still a heel, and then got turned on. And his babyface turn just felt a bit like, well, I'm on my own now, so I kind of have to be a babyface.
And it did work.
No,
it didn't work. I felt like they had to bring in Joe to get any heat.
Yeah.
Joe is what got the heat in that match. The match was cold. Like, Triple H could have a 32-second match.
Which was 32 seconds.
We'll get the crowd in a match. And they like the last 2 minutes ago, see, we built them up to the end. It's like, no, we were happy for it to finish.
Yes.
And then, we had Bray Wyatt, Randy Orton. Oh, God, it was a bad day.
Yeah.
But, so, you then move into another point. They have to have a reason to win. Okay? So, obviously, a title match makes it the most obvious. I want the title. I want to keep the title. When you can create that, I need to win, and there's no title on the line, or no number one contenders match, take Drunk. Drew and Punk! Take Drunk, for example. They needed to win, because it was about respect. It was about, I want to be better than you.
Families into
it's now more about, proving something. I loved that dynamic. And if you can build a match where it really matters who wins, it really, really matters. And you know what? I think sometimes the best feud could be, I am better than you. It's always so simple. Just, I am better than you. Kurt Angle, Shawn Michaels, WrestleMania 21 starts off meh. But then they built the idea of Kurt, and they're on different shows. So they had to build the rivalry separately. They only crossed paths twice, I think. Kurt came and attacked Shawn as a disguise, and then Shawn was a cameraman and attacked Kurt. That's about it. So Kurt's on SmackDown on his own, going, I'm going to do everything that Shawn Michaels did to prove I'm better, beats Jannetty, sings a song, does a ladder match and all this jazz. That's fantastic. and then gets to the match. It really is right. Who is the better man? And you cared about who was going to win, even though technically it meant nothing. It meant absolutely nothing, and no one actually did anything after that match until they returned against each other in vengeance. So that's a really important thing for me: winning a match. Because at the end of the day, this is why some feuds fall flat. Because you have to wrestle.
Yeah.
You know, you could be the best character in the world. You could be a great character, but it's like, and then you got to wrestle. And I think a lot of wrestlers of the Attitude Era and a few in the Ruthless Aggression, you know, like I'll give you an example: Elias. If you took Elias and gave him John Cena's wrestling ability, it doesn't even have to be someone amazing. John Cena's wrestling ability, Elias is a main event player. But he's the most bland, boring wrestler who can't build a story. So storyline, and then you have the match. And that's why everyone goes, why wasn't he pushed? Because the matches, no one cared. They were really dull, really boring. Character work's like a 10. Wrestling is like a 4. And you can't do that in the main event, not for a long period of time anyway.
No, absolutely.
So the match, we then build to the match. So we've got obstacles, we've got characters having autonomy over their decisions, we've got characters having meaning behind why they're feuding, we've got the idea that it can become personal as another one as well, bringing in extra layers of extra characters, creates that amazing dynamic with the storyline, but at the same time, escalation at all time. Not rushed escalation, you know, reasons for escalation as well. I think Cody and The Rock and Roman did a beautiful version of escalation between WrestleMania 40. That did escalate, you know, from the slap, you know, and that's just a slap, and then it escalates to the next promo exchange, and escalates to getting bloody backstage, and then it escalates to, you know, a tag team match, putting it on the line and all this stuff, and then there's meaning, then Seth gets involved. That's what we're on about. That's why everyone loves WrestleMania 40, because you've got this long-lasting storyline going on. We talk about history and backstory, and then we've got new characters, new components. Cody lost, so therefore there's a redemption arc. The reason it all works, and everyone goes, it's cinema, and people go, oh, it's overrated. It's not. If you think it's overrated, you don't like wrestling. It's simple as that, because you can't go, oh, it was silly, because it's not silly, and you can't go, oh, they didn't wrestle. It's like they had amazing matches everywhere. Both of Cody and Roman's matches are incredible. 39's a brilliant match. You know, everyone forgets how brilliant the match is, and 40 is a brilliant spectacle. And the tag team match, though long and slow at parts, it needed to be slow and long because it had build. The crowd are there the entire time, and that's how you build that storyline. And both matches delivered on what they needed to promise. And the match is the most important thing. Like, I think about Triple H and Shawn Michaels, SummerSlam 2002. We were all, that rivalry was incredible. I love it. It's one of my favourite rivalries of all time. I'm a kid and I'm really into it. The promo exchange, the video package going into it, Shawn Michaels gets shoved through his head, and then Shawn goes, it was you, Hunter. You're damn right, it was me. Great, love it. Triple H had a reason, you know, you're too weak, so it sounds like he's protecting him, but really it's villainous ways and all this jazz. But we were all going, it's been 4 years with a back injury. Can Shawn wrestle? We were all, who were real fans, not me at the time, I'm like, go on, Shawn, I believe in you. Your back might not hurt. Every time he gets back breaking, no, Shawn, no. His back is really hurt. God, kayfabe, man, kayfabe. God, I love kayfabe as a child. But like, real fans, they're going, can he actually like do this? He's barely been in the ring. He's done a little bit in his training school, which is why he went, oh, I might be able to. It's like when Edge fell off a bike. Going,
Same thing.
I might be able to. And the match is unbelievable, and so unbelievable that they went, I don't know if they went, we need to take Shawn out just in case it is bad with the sledgehammer at the end, or they went, no, we might be able to do another thing later on. I don't know what the idea behind it was, but when they hit him with the sledgehammer again, kayfabe, no, Shawn, he's dead. But like, at the same time, I'm like, wow, I'm ready for another one. The amount of times you watch a match, you go, yeah, I could do that again. I could do it again. And that's a great example, and that's like a 1.5 month build. It's one of the greatest, in my eyes, matches in SummerSlam history, if not the greatest match in SummerSlam history.
Well, I mean, look at the Cena and Punk Money in the Bank that we talked so much about.
Oh my God,
3 weeks of build. It was randomly, he won a number one contenders match.
I have no memory of him winning the number one contenders match. I think it's incredible that they went, we're going to do a storyline with it. How often did that happen? Vince
Amazing.
Going, your contract's running out, and usually they're just like, to the side of the, like they didn't do it with Dean Ambrose. They could have done a thing with Dean Ambrose going into Mania. It wasn't even on the Mania card, was
I don't believe so, no.
So like you could have gone, a loser leaves WrestleMania or whatever, last WrestleMania match of all time, something. They could have done that. It's almost like they didn't believe he was actually going to go, almost. But they believed Punk was going to go. And I think they just went, yeah, we're alright with you going. That's what it felt like.
And Punk hadn't even like asked to do that because he was so checked out. He was like, just get me out of the show. Like, he wasn't bothered. And then they came up to him, which was amazing.
Yeah.
And look what happens
Oh
when
my
you
God,
do crazy things, WWE. But yeah, so it doesn't necessarily have to be a really long build.
No,
Long
it does
builds are
not.
great, but
And there's no history there between those two.
no.
Cena and Punk, I don't even think they've come across each other at all.
No, I mean, he kind of mentioned him riding on the back of his car at Mania 22 as like a little bit, but that wasn't the reason.
But I mean, real backstory. That's just has happened.
A little thing. Yeah. So
which you can use and you should use. Very good, excellent.
But there's different flavors of storyline.
MJF used it with Samoa
Joe.
Joe.
With Samoa Joe.
He was like a thing in Samoa Joe in WWE.
Yes,
he slapped him out of the way and stuff. So that worked, and then obviously you got MJF with the photo with Punk. You're absolutely right.
Yeah,
those happenstance.
Yeah. So there's no one correct way of doing a storyline. There's just loads of different good flavors, and there's loads of different tools you can use, and there's pretty much infinite things you can do. But there's just basic principles that do make a good storyline.
And I will finish off when it comes to the match. Don't forget that you've had a feud. Our biggest pet hate is we're in a blood feud. It's a blood feud. I hate you. I'm angry with you. Collar elbow title. Yeah. And you're like, collar elbow title. Elbow? What? Can't say it. We have a hook.
Yeah.
They have a hook in the ring, and you're like, I'm okay with that if you've built a dynamic around it, that they've even each other out, or, one's there going, I will not lose my head against you or whatever. But you've had to have talked about that. It's why I hate when title matches become blood feud, and they have to do the, in this corner, and they have to pose, and also they're going, in reality they want to beat each other up, and I go look at Rock versus Brock, which wasn't that big of a storyline. They'd barely done anything, and yet Rock puts the title down, draws a line, runs in, they start the match. How many times did Austin start a WWE title match just by getting in and getting started?
Mania 17.
Exactly. That's the main event of WrestleMania. And you can do it. You don't need to do, little tie-ups or little... Go in and go blood feud. Whereas when Shawn Michaels and Kurt Angle had their match at WrestleMania 21, that was about who was the better man. Starting with wrestling, same for Jericho and Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 19. Great rivalry about the young pretender as well. I'm better than you now. I used to copy you. Fantastic stuff. Wonderful storyline. See what I mean? It doesn't have to be the same either. It's about just give that reason. And then the match has to nail it. You've got to get the match right. It's got to follow the storyline you've been telling. It's got to follow the correct result as well. And what I mean by the correct result, I don't mean predictability. The idea of going, okay, what's next? How often does somebody win and you're like, oh, you're not going to do anything with it. Okay, what's the point in that? Because you haven't got the idea because you were so busy doing this feud. Or even worse, neither comes out of it well because they're just done and then right to the side. How often do a tag team break up? I think Crime Time have their feud and then no on telly anymore. And you're like, you just had a pay-per-view match. Why are you not there? Because they've done that now. Oh, I haven't written anything for you for next week. I'm only writing for John Cena. Have you got anything else to say on a storyline purpose?
I think obviously you want your twists and turns, but you don't want them to be forced. But some good twists and turns in there, like the Festival of Friendship's one of the best twists going. That kind of thing.
Batista, Triple H, convinced that JBL had tried to run him over, and Batista looked like he was heading to SmackDown. And they actually sent him. Instead of just going, "You're going to be SmackDown," no, I don't believe you. He goes to SmackDown, beats up JBL, destroys his limo, and all that lot. And then Triple H reveals, without Batista realizing that he's listening. Triple H realised Batista's listening, that, I did it so it was for Dave's own good. So you knew the turn was actually coming as well. They'd already told you the turn, which is why everyone was excited, because Triple H and Ric Flair aren't in the know. How often is it that the heels aren't in the know?
Yeah.
Then they go, yeah, you can do it. We all know Batista's about to change because we've heard it.
Yeah, dramatic irony.
And there's your twists and turns. It worked really well because that was 2 months they had to do from the Rumble to that point. Yeah. It's a long time. Think about the Rumble to WrestleMania. That's actually a long time, and it actually, I think, falls flat sometimes.
Yeah.
I really do. You think about how many times they get to the match here. I think Triple H, Jericho, 18. Yeah. That match is just flat. Means nothing. When you compare it to Brock and Angle, that built 2 months really well without doing a lot. They didn't do a lot in the grand scheme of things. In fact, they had a match at No Way Out. It was a tag team match, but they're in the same ring as each other, which I hate, by the way, because that's the thing we stopped doing as well. Can we stop having a match on Raw, SmackDown, Dynamite, and then having the pay-per-view match? MJF and Ospreay had an hour-long classic on Dynamite, and then they had a match at Wembley. And the match at Wembley is amazing. We were there, it was great. But I sat there and I turned to you and went, that match was awesome. The match on Dynamite was better, though.
It shouldn't be that way around.
And it shouldn't be that way around. Yeah. Or do the hour-long Dynamite match after you've done the pay-per-view match. No. The whole point of the pay-per-view is to sell.
Psychology, isn't it? Yeah, I do agree.
And psychology is probably the key word. Storylines are about psychology, and that's character psychology and the psychology of the feud, why they're doing it and what's building to it in the first place. But we want to know from you. What do you think makes a great storyline? What storylines have you really enjoyed? What about the spooky stuff? How does that work? And all that stuff when you get The Undertaker and Kane getting involved. What storylines just didn't work for you? What storylines had no working, but yet you were still so pumped? Just tell us in the comments below. Anything else you want to throw in at the end there?
Literally no.
Yeah,
I think I've said everything I need to say.
I think I say no. We love storylines, and I think it's really important, this dynamic that I think people have just lost the point of wrestling, and I think Triple H is bringing that back, and I think Tony Khan needs to see it and realise that his most successful things have been based on storytelling. And at the end of the day, if you want to bring fans in who aren't wrestling fans, storylines and characters are going to be the way to do it. Thank you very much, yeah.
What I will say, actually, is they don't always have to be a long thing. Sometimes a storyline can be one episode of TV.
It really can.
One episode. Yeah. You're just setting up why you're having this match. You have the match, you conclude it. It can be in one episode as well. Yeah. So it's very basic. It doesn't have to be a long thing.
No,
storylines can be anything.
You're absolutely right. Just like this episode is a one-episode thing. We built that conclusion until there was a double winner. Yeah. Thank you very much for joining us. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Comment all the things I've said in the bottom, and we will see you next time on another roundtable discussion. What do you want us to talk about? We just do things off the hoof and have a lovely chat. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.